What if the world around you wasn't solid at all? What if instead, it's just a sea of shimmering possibilities, waiting for you to look at it? Now that sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, right? Well, this idea actually comes from one of the most famous and frankly weirdest experiments in all of science. But is it true? Does your mind literally bend reality? The answer science gives is way more complex, and honestly far more fascinating than a simple yes or no. We're going to look at the hard evidence, the wild theories, and what it all actually means for you. To get our heads around this, we have to take a trip into the bizarre world of quantum physics. For more than a century, physicists have been scratching their heads over a single experiment that completely shatters our day-to-day sense of reality. The double-slit experiment. Here's the gist. Imagine you're firing tiny particles, like electrons, one by one at a back screen. Between your electron gun and the screen, there's a wall with two little slits in it. Now, if you close one slit, the electrons that get through behave exactly as you'd expect. They hit the screen in a simple, straightforward band right behind the open slit. Makes sense, they're like tiny bullets. But when you open both slits, something that seems impossible happens. The electrons, still fired one at a time, don't land in two simple bands. Instead, they create a complex pattern of many bands, something called an interference pattern. It's the pattern you'd get if a wave had passed through both slits at once and interfered with itself. It's as if each individual particle somehow goes through both slits simultaneously, exploring all paths like a wave of pure potential. That alone is mind-bending. But the real kicker, the part that launched 1,000 theories, is what happens when you try to peek. When scientists place a detector at the slits to find out which path each electron actually takes, the weirdness just vanishes. The interference pattern disappears, and you're back to two simple bands. It's as if the particle knows it's being watched. This phenomenon is famously called the observer effect. And this is the exact point where the story often takes a wrong turn into science fiction. The word observer makes it sound like it's a conscious person in a lab coat whose mind is changing the outcome. This has led to the popular, and very seductive, idea that human consciousness itself is the secret ingredient that collapses a wave of possibilities into one concrete reality. But is that what the science actually says? The hard truth is no. The standard view in quantum mechanics is that the observer doesn't have to be a conscious mind at all. In quantum physics, observation is simply interaction. It could be a detector, a camera, a single photon of light, or even a stray air molecule that bumps into the electron. Any physical interaction that logs the which-way information is enough to destroy the delicate quantum state. This process is called quantum decoherence. Think of the electron's wave of possibilities as a ridiculously fragile soap bubble. The slightest touch, any interaction with its environment will cause it to pop, leaving behind just a single droplet in a definite location. So the strange quantum effects aren't necessarily tied to a human mind, but to a quantum system losing its perfect isolation. Most physicists today do not believe consciousness is the special sauce that makes it happen. However, that's not the end of the story. The fact that physicists still debate exactly why and how this collapse happens, what's called the measurement problem, has left the door cracked open for some much more speculative ideas. One of the earliest was the von Neumann-Wigner interpretation, which boldly suggested that the wave function collapse only truly finalizes in the consciousness of a human observer. In this view, your mind really is the thing that turns quantum maybe into physical now. It's a fascinating thought, but this interpretation isn't widely accepted by physicists today. It's seen more as a philosophical stance because it's pretty hard to imagine how you could ever scientifically test it. A more modern, and very detailed, theory is orchestrated objective reduction, or OR-CORE, proposed by physicists Sir Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff. They suggest that consciousness isn't created by neurons firing, but from even deeper, quantum-level processes happening inside those neurons, in tiny structures called microtubules. OR-CORE proposes these microtubules act as tiny quantum computers. According to the theory, these quantum states collapse on their own, and each one of these collapses is a moment of conscious experience. The implication is staggering, that our brains are basically biological quantum computers tapping into a consciousness that's woven into the fabric of the universe. While the theory has sparked a ton of debate, it's still highly controversial and unproven. Many scientists argue that the brain is simply too warm, wet, and noisy for such delicate quantum states to survive for any meaningful amount of time. Okay, that was a lot, I know. If your brain is buzzing with questions right now, which it should be, and you love exploring these kinds of profound mysteries, then definitely hit that subscribe button. Alright, let's get real for a second. Does any of this prove that your mind, through sheer willpower, can bend a spoon or manifest a sports car out of thin air? The science says a hard no. Not quite. The truth is more subtle, but in many ways, much more practical and powerful. While quantum mechanics might not give you superpowers, it gives you a powerful new metaphor for understanding reality. It reveals a universe that isn't fixed and set in stone. When you repeatedly focus your attention on a thought, a skill, or a mindset, you are physically strengthening the neural pathways for it. As neuroscientists love to say, neurons that fire together, wire together. By consciously directing your focus on problems on what you resent, you are literally building a brain that is better and faster at creating that experience. Changing your brain to create a different life. So let's circle back to where we started. Does your mind bend reality? The observer effect is about physical interaction, not psychic intention, and fascinating theories like Orcore remain highly speculative. But what science does prove is that reality is infinitely stranger and more fluid than it looks. At its very foundation, it's a dance of probability and potential. And science also proves, through neuroplasticity, that your mind has a stunning capacity to change itself based on where you place your attention. Your true power doesn't lie in collapsing quantum waves out there, but in directing the spotlight of your attention in here. By choosing what you focus on, you aren't literally picking a reality from an infinite quantum field, but you are selecting your experience of it. You are choosing which possibilities to notice, which pathways in your brain to strengthen, and ultimately, which version of yourself you want to be. You are the observer of your life. And in a world built from uncertainty and potential, that is the most profound power you could ever have. The universe might not be waiting for you to look at it, but your life certainly is. Observe it with intention,